So I'm going to click apply on that. And now, in theory, we should be able to get out to the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. It's going to ask me to relog in since I just changed the password. I'll go on admin, type my password, and now I'm going to ping out to the internet. And I'll start the Google 8888, and it is working successfully. The next thing we need to do is set up filter rules. Now, these filter rules protect two things. Not only the individual router, but the networks that are connected to the router. So, anything that is directed to specifically the router itself and not the rest of the network attached to it is called the input chain. And anything that heads into the input chain means it's trying to speak with the router itself directly at in that specific connection. Now, typically I would put a block rule on the input chain. However, we want to set up an address list first, or a whitelist. And we're going to go to the address list tab. So IP firewall address list. Click on plus, and we're going to give it a name. And let's just go ahead and call it whitelist. And I'm going to call this the address of where we're allowing to connect from. And let's go ahead and give it my address that we chose. So 192.168.1.0/24. This is the /24 network of the .1. And let's use the default 88 network as well. Oops, that's one thing. If you leave one open and don't copy it, you might overwrite it. So these two IP ranges are allowed to connect into the router, period. Now, there's two ways of going about this. When you go to filter rules, you can block on a specific interface, or you can block on all interfaces. To be safe, for the input chain, I recommend only setting up the WAN interface, so that will be Ether 1. And we'll click on the Advanced tab. And now we're going to choose our source address list of our whitelist. And we're going to click the not box, click on action, and we're going to set the drop. And in essence, what this is saying is anything that tries to connect into the through the Ether 1 interface, specifically going into the router, that's not a part of the whitelist, that connection gets dropped, or that packet gets dropped. We can be more specific of how we want the functionality to work in the whole 9 yards. I'm going to go ahead and put a specific state on here. It says any new connections. So if we have a established connection due to a VPN or some other, we want that to stay established and not drop those related packets. The next thing we want to do is set up a forward chain that blocks everything coming into the Ether 1 interface. That is new and not part of the destination NAT table. And we're going to set that to drop as well. And basically this says anything that is not within the port forwarding table or NAT table, drop those new connections from coming in. Now, but if you already have an established connection, it will assume and have those connections come through. All right, let's go ahead and click on IP filter, add a new rule, and on both the, at least for the input chain, we're going to enable ICMP to come through always, and we're going to allow that to come through on every connection. And basically that'll allow everything to ping the router to let it know that it's alive. Now if you don't want to enable that for your network, you don't have to, but please remember that these rules are processed in the order that they are read from top to bottom. So we'll hit rule number 0, rule 1, rule 2, etc., in the appropriate chains. So if something is destined for the forward chain, that only will process through there. If it's destined for the input chain, it'll go through these rules specifically. I like seeing a bit of everything, so it helps me out with that. And now I'm going to do a quick comparison to my other router, just to see, just to double check on the firewall for setting up port forwards. Let me just double check. New, not, okay, that's right. Ether 1. Okay. Now, the next most important thing, or not, I wouldn't say most important thing, but something that comes up quite frequently, is that you have your router out there and you have an application that needs to open up a port to the world for things to work. And typically that comes when you're using a FTP server or you're hosting a test web server. As long as you have this filter rule put in place right here, where it says drop forward anything that's not for your destination NAT, adding port forwards is a breeze going from here on out. So you're going to click on NAT and then add rule. I'll go open the window up a little bit. And now this will be destination NAT. And this will be coming in through the Ether 1 interface. And I'll just do a quick comparison to something I have on my other screen here. Okay. It's going to be TCP, in case you want to use TCP or UDP. And destination port, let's go ahead and say it's 21. I highly recommend that you do not touch source port and do not use any port. That means source port can be randomly generated, and it's usually meant for specific situations, where destination port is the port that the packet is headed towards, and that's where you usually want to keep that. And lastly, we go over to the Action tab, and we're going to click on Destination NAT, and then it's going to ask us for what IP address we want to send this to. So just for the heck of it, we'll go ahead and send it to 192.168.1.21. Now, if you wanted to translate that to a different port using port translation, you could click on the ports and enter the port right here. However, if you just want to leave this alone, it'll still come on port 21. Click apply, and now your port forward has been created. But then you're saying, but Sean, I want to enable port forwarding for Plex or something else. How do I do that? It's easy. You go, as long as you have your one filter forward rule right here, click on that, add, or easier, if you double click the rule you already have created, you click on copy. It copies everything from that already, and you change the IP address that's destined to if it changes, and then you go to the general tab and change the port number. which for Plex is, I think, 32400. Click Apply, and now you have a port forward set up for Plex. Now, I highly recommend that you comment on each of these rules that aren't self-explanatory. So Masquerade, pretty self-explanatory. You should only have one of those options in your router. But each one of these could mean a different thing. So port 21 typically for FTP, 32400 typically for Plex, but I usually like to comment on these. So let's go ahead and call this Plex port forward. And I'll right click and call this FTP forward. And there we go. All we need to do is have a device send to that, and it should work. What else are we missing, folks? We have our WAN. We have our creating the bridge, adding Ethernet ports to it, the wireless interface, LAN, WAN. We have our firewall rules, which includes the address list, NAT, and the filter rules. I think that is about it for now. I'm going to go ahead and end out this video for now, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me, either through the YouTube channel or through other mentions of social media that I'll be around on. Anyways, thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.